Hey guys, my name's Andrew. Real quick background, I'm 30 years old. I go to med school out here in Virginia, and I like to play chess. The reason why I'm starting to make these videos now is because of John Bartholomew, which you can see here. He's a really good international master chess player out of Minnesota, and I've been watching a lot of his videos. I mean, I have for a year or two, but in particular, if I could go here to his playlists, you can see he's got a lot of playlists here. They're all really good to watch through. But I really like his climbing the rating ladders, where he goes through and he plays starting with a really low rating. He plays players of different ratings and climbing his way up. And these ones here, the tactics trainings video, where he climbs the tactics training ladder. He starts, all the way down at 1200 and works his way up. The last video he did was up to 2341. I really appreciate those videos. I like them. I appreciate a lot of things he says in them, including things about when you're trying these tactics and playing these games, it's more important to get it right than to do it quickly, which I think a lot of people miss out on, me especially. So I would like to start making these videos sort of as just to keep myself honest when I do them, and to try and get it right rather than go quick. I don't have a lot of time, and when I play, I tend to just do it more or less mindlessly, and I get a lot of them wrong. So I'm trying to make these videos to see if I can spend a little more time, focus a little bit more on getting them right and less on just doing it quickly. So in order to do that, I've created a new profile here, Andrew VA. I have no rating in any type of chess. I have no chess training rating. I've been playing for a few years just by myself, never had any coaching or anything. Started when I was about 25, 26, something like that. So I'm not very good. I'd like to be able to, during the course of these videos, get my tactics trainings up to about 2,000. So we'll see how good that gets. So it just kind of gives you guys a rating. I would expect my tactics training rating right now to be about like 1,800 or maybe closer to 1,900, but I'd like to get it to 2,000 while making these videos. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into it and see what we can do, try and slow down and get them right. Okay, so as you can see here, my puzzle rating is 1,500. That's just what it starts at. And over here on the left, you can also see where it talks about the game where they got these tactics from. So this was a 5+0 blitz rated game between these two players, both about 2,000 rated. So let's see what I can get with this. So find the best move for black. I can see that the white has the two rooks lined up on the G file. I do have this take here. Instantly, the things that I look for are the real forcing moves. So this take here on the E file, rook takes E3, is pretty forcing. Let's see what could happen. Takes there, what's the follow-up? Can also see that the rook there on G4 is relatively locked in, doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. Right now, my bishop is controlling this G5 square, and the king and the rook are covering this G6 square. So if I move that pawn, where's the rook go? He'll have to go back, and then I can move my bishop up. He is trapped. Just to win an exchange. Is that right? Just win an exchange. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't look like much is going on over there on the queen side, everything looks pretty closed in. I feel like it's just to win an exchange here. Let's see what happens. Good, best move. And yeah, now I think bishop to h4 to force the win of the exchange. Good, and then I can take here. Good, and that's it. And this is lichess, so when you finish, it does bring up the local stockfish, and you can see, you can do other moves. Often when I miss, I'll jump back to the start and I'll put in my other moves and see why it was wrong, and it's obviously wrong most of the time. It's not like there's also a good move that you could do. Usually it's also very wrong. So anyway, so this maintains a 2.5 pawn advantage for the black side. So let's continue. All right, you're playing white in this one. Try not to do any annoying things like whistle. So black has not yet castled. White has. So what do I have here? So let's think. Knight moves. That bishop on the d file is not protected. If I can get that pawn away, there might be a discovery on the queen. Maybe there's a discovery on the queen anyway because the bishop isn't protected. Yeah, so I was looking at the c knight to e4. The problem there is that the queen can move back to c7 and defend the bishop. But I think if I move the knight instead to b4, protecting that c7 square, the queen is attacked, the bishop is attacked, and I don't think there's a square for the queen to go to defend that bishop. So I think I'll either win the queen or the bishop with check. I don't see any in-between moves. If he takes the knight, I can just retake with the bishop over here. Yeah, I like that. If he just takes, I take. Yeah, let's see what happens here. Good, best move. Yeah, take and take. Good. Wow, my rating jumped up really quickly. I've got a cup of tea here, if that doesn't bother anyone. Not that anyone's going to watch this video. This is really just for me. Although my rating has jumped up to 1801 really quickly, so I hope that slows down because I'm going to start missing a lot of these. Let's see here. So just a quick count, 6 to 6 it looks like. So the material is even, 2 rooks, 2 minors, and 6 pawns. Black king looks pretty well protected back there. The knight is hanging, but so's the white bishop. So I could take on e3. He would take on, oh, I'm sorry, I could take on e6. He would take on e3. There's a check there on g5 to get my bishop out of the way, but he could just take with the knight. Can I take the rook first? Does that do anything? He just recaptures with the rook, not really. And my rook on a1 is hanging right now, just because of the double take. So takes, 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 with check. So what if I push the pawn? Does that do anything? He moves back to e8. If I do a nothing move, he takes the a1 rook, and then my rook is pinned anyway. Takes, although, takes the knight, he takes the rook, I take the pawn. Now I've got a pawn on f7, a protected pawn on f7, but he can take my rook. So what if I take the rook first? So if I take the rook first, take a1 takes a3, then rook takes a3, pawn takes e6. If he takes back, I have pawn takes e7. Sorry, if he takes e3, I have pawn takes e7, f7. And then how does he stop the pawn? King back. And then knight g5. Does that work? Rook a3, pawn e6, rook e3, pawn e7, king e8, knight g5, king f8. I keep saying e, I mean f. I'm not really used to saying these numbers out loud. Let's see. Knight g5, threatening h7, queening. The bishop can't protect. The rook could come back, but I think I've got too much material there on it. I think that works. What if I take, does he have anything else? I think he has to take back. And then pawn takes. I think that works. Good, good. Now takes here. All right, and that's it. So just real quick to cover, sometimes it stops here and you're not quite sure why it's good. So it's good to try and think through, from what John's been saying anyway, it's good to try and think through the remainder of it, even if it does stop after a move or two. So let's see what happens here after rook takes. Yeah, so it just jumps up. So that's not even his best move there, because the threat here is now that rook can take or pawn can take. Pawn takes. You can tell by the size of the arrow is better. So pawn takes, and then king jumps back, and then knight in. So this was the line I was looking at, threatening the knight taking up here. Or I suppose pawn push, no, because the bishop is blocked there, so you wouldn't want to push that pawn. So threatening here, and they're just saying rook over to protect that pawn, but then I could just take it. Yeah, so anyway, so that's the line I was looking at, and it seems to have worked, so that's great to hear. Wow, 1912. I get 3 in a row, and I gain, what's that, 400 and some points. That's too many, so we'll see what happens. Okay, playing white again. I'm also trying to get in the habit of using the chess, well, what are those called? The square numbers and letters. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it doesn't matter. When you read a book, which I've tried to read a couple books on it, and they use the squares instead of pictures for everything, it really is a good habit to try and get into, to be able to picture the board and picture which square they're talking about. So I'm going to be trying to use, like, pawn f6 just now. I'm going to try and use the square names just for me, and I suppose for anyone who watches this. So pushing that kingside pawn like that is a standard reply that I would expect is to move the queen out now to h5 to give that check. There's a lot of traps like that in opening theory, why you would never want to move that f pawn, because the queen can jump out. And in this case, the rook or the knight is on e4 instead of f6, so that square is not protected. So what happens then now? Queen jumps out. King can't move down because there's a mate there on f7. So he has to protect that square, right? Protect it so he can push the pawn. And then what? I can just take the pawn with the knight, right? So queen h5, pawn g6, knight takes g6. Pawn can't take back because the rook would be hanging. And the bishop is protected by the knight then on g6. So he could just swap bishops, but then I take with check anyway. So maybe that's not even the best. So queen h5. Is that force? Because king down, queen up is checkmate, right? So queen h5. Yeah, and king over is also checkmate. King to f8 is also mate on f7. So queen h5, pawn g6, knight takes g6. And probably, I guess he doesn't have to trade that bishop. What does he do? Because I'm threatening a bunch of nasty discoveries, right? Just taking the rook, besides not leading to mate. Probably jump back down, leading to mate. Yeah, that looks just too good. But my puzzle rating is 1912 already. These might be getting harder. So I guess we'll see in a second, but that looks too good. That is best, and pawn moves, and I think you have to take. Takes, okay, and then just win the rook. Yeah. And they're saying the best is king out rather than blocking with the bishop. So just to explain what I was saying, if I were to move the knight, jump the knight in, and he doesn't take, because if he takes, I take the rook. Saying what else is there for him to do? I guess just king down to get out of those discoveries. I was looking at if he could do this, but then I can take back with check, but I can also just take the rook with check, leading to some nasty stuff where he has to come down, and I can win this pawn or come in here. Yeah, anyway, okay, so pretty good.